Mrs S. Welcome to this very special edition for the pre-release 2026 for AQA Paper 3. And this is all about how to answer the 9-mark question on your pre-release paper. So get ready, get your flashcards ready, get your pens, get your highlighters, and most importantly, if you've got it, get your pre-release paper. And we're going to go through what to do, how to write it, and how to score big on that 9-mark question. So first of all, let's go straight to it. What is the 2026 pre-release about? Hopefully by now your teacher has provided you with the pre-release or at least given you some guidance about what it's about. If they haven't, or if they have, you should know it's about whether a reservoir should be built in rural Lincolnshire. So it's really a classic case of weighing up two sides, which hopefully you know is what we generally do on a 9-mark question. We look at two sides of an argument and we weigh up the strength of those arguments to draw a conclusion. So let's get straight in and have a look at what the pre-release was actually getting at. And we've got lots of 4 arguments about why that particular reservoir should be built just southeast of Sleaford. So first of all, it ensures a reliable water supply. And we know that this because the pre-release tells us that Lincolnshire is one of the driest parts of the UK and rainfall is becoming less reliable due to climate change. And I'll explain more about that in just a minute. The reservoir would store water in winter and supply it in summer. So the double whammy. Water would be transferred from rivers like the River Trent and the River Witham. The next reason is it supports population growth and housing. There are plans for 175,000 new homes in the area. And of course, that means more people. And if we've got more people, that means higher water demand and greater potential water stress. The reservoir ensures there is enough water for future communities and businesses in the area. The other big one is the adaptation to climate change. So instead of mitigation, we're talking about adaptation. Can we store water to reduce drought risk in the area and make rainfall a little bit more easy to manage because it's becoming more unpredictable? The reservoir acts as a long-term climate adaptation technique. The other factor is, of course, reducing flood risk, including an overflow drain system. This would store excess winter water instead of letting it cause flooding and helps manage water levels and reduce winter flood risk. We've got environmental benefits as well. We know that the reservoir would encourage wildlife, create wetland habitats for birds and for mammals, and restore and increase biodiversity. And this could improve local ecosystems rather than harm them. And finally, we know there's lots of socio-economic benefits. It's going to be open to the public with walking and cycling routes, sailing, water sports, new footpaths, cycle tracks. So this has the potential to create lots of positive multiplier effects by providing leisure opportunities and improving quality of life. So that really gives us a nice summary of the 4 arguments that we can see in the 2026 pre-release. One of the things, though, that we want to do is create a big synoptic link. What is the link? What is this paper really all about? And here, I think with these 4 arguments, we can really see the link to the climate crisis. As soon as I showed the pre-release to a lot of my own students in class, a lot of them said, well, hang on a minute, why is it about water deficit? Why is it about a lack of water in Lincolnshire? Because isn't warm weather and warm air carrying more moisture? So shouldn't we be getting more rain? Yes, that's true. But remember about the systems, the rainfall patterns that we have here in the UK. We would be getting more Atlantic storms hitting the west of the UK, where we have higher levels of rainfall anyway, with greater levels of surplus. And by the time those systems move east, they've often lost most of their moisture. So eastern areas like Lincolnshire naturally get less rain, and that contrast is going to be increasing. In recent data, eastern England often gets much less than average rainfall compared to the rest of the country. We also know that warmer temperatures will dry the land faster. As the climate warms, more water evaporates from soil and rivers and plants, and this is going to leave the ground drier, even if rainfall hasn't dropped hugely. So it's really important to bear that big synoptic link in mind. And we're going to be talking more about that later on. Next then, what are the arguments against the reservoir? So the first one we can see here is this idea of a loss of homes and a community impact. Inevitably, building or constructing a reservoir means flooding an area. And we know that over 2,000 people have signed a petition against this project, and that's made really clear in the pre-release. More than 50 families are going to lose their homes, and local communities are going to be disrupted. This could break up established rural communities and actually reduce quality of life. So again, we're thinking about those synoptic links. We also know there's economic impacts and job losses. Local businesses may suffer or close. People could lose their jobs. Leisure businesses like riding stables, for example, may be forced to shut. And the development could harm the local rural economy. We also know there's going to be a loss of farmland. The reservoir would flood large areas of farmland, and farmers could either lose their land or lose their income. And this is especially concerning when there's a pressure to produce sort of more local food. Next, we've got the idea of construction disruption and safety concerns, road closures, increased traffic on narrow country roads, higher risk of accidents, and short-term but significant disruption for local residents. And finally, the stress and uncertainty for local people, a sort of ongoing uncertainty about this project, negative impacts on people's mental health. People may avoid actually investing in farms or businesses due to this. So this creates a sort of long-term insecurity in the area. The National Farmers Union warns they could have significant negative effects on local communities and farms. So that really summarises the against side of our weighing scales that we were talking about before. So what about this time with the big synoptic link? Well, it's a tricky one because this is all about agriculture, farming and food security, which is obviously a big part of your study of resource management. But we also know farmers in this area are at risk, and drought is causing a significant economic and social impact to agriculture. There is data recently to say that over £800 million worth of crops were lost in 2025 due to drought conditions around the UK. So these are farmers which cannot afford to go without water security. So what about making a decision? So the good news here is you need to make one, and whatever decision you make is the right decision. There is no such thing as a wrong decision. But the important thing is here is that you make one. Don't sit on the fence and go, oh, well, I'm a little bit divided. Try and put yourself in one camp or the other. Are you for the reservoir or are you against the reservoir, and why? So what's the 9-mark question going to look like? Well, this question is actually the one from 2018 because we've had a reservoir pre-release before, and this is what it looked like. Do you think the proposed reservoir development should go ahead? Justify your decision. And that's a 9-mark question, but we always have 3 marks for spelling, punctuation and grammar. So it's really important that you go in at this with a paragraph structure, just like you would on any other 9-marker. And to get into that level 3 marks, you need to give a well-balanced, well-evidenced argument. You're not just going to say yes or no and give your reasons. You're going to present those weighing scales and say for, say against, and say your decision. So paragraph 1 is presenting the main reason for your choice. So if you have decided for the reservoir, for example, then this is where you're going to give a paragraph about why you think the reservoir could be really good. Make sure you give crucially specific evidence from the pre-release booklet, but be careful not to just write it out from the booklet without development. Make sure you're explaining the evidence. Make sure you're supporting the evidence and really developing your points using your geographical knowledge. Can you make those synoptic links that I was talking about? So here's an example of a perfect answer for paragraph 1. And this is about if you agree with the reservoir. But remember, you might actually disagree with the reservoir. So your first paragraph might be an opposing argument to this. So you can see the areas I've highlighted in green is where I've used evidence from the pre-release. The areas highlighted in orange are where I've developed the evidence and explained the evidence from the pre-release. I haven't just copied it out. And that opening statement in red is to really show what my statement is all about, what this paragraph is all about. Building the proposed reservoir in Lincolnshire is a positive and sustainable solution to increasing water demand. And the rest of that will support that argument throughout. Then go into paragraph 2. This is your counter argument, also known as the flip side. Now, you've got to get an opposing view into your answer. If you just write a one-sided argument, you are not going to get 7 to 9 marks. Start this paragraph with something like, on the other hand, or an opposing argument is, and do exactly what you did in the first paragraph. Explain why it shows that viewpoint. Use evidence from the pre-release booklet, and make sure you make synoptic links again if you can. But then as you get towards the end of paragraph 2, because this is the argument you don't agree with, you're going to now crush it. Start the word with the word however, and now argue why this second argument may not be as strong as the first. And this is really showing a level of analysis and understanding that is going to impress the examiner and get you into that 7 to 9 bracket. So here's an example. There are strong arguments against building the reservoir, particularly due to its negative impacts on local communities and agriculture. So this time, paragraph 2 is arguing against the reservoir. Now remember, this might be your first paragraph if you think you do not agree with the reservoir. Remember, this is just an example of how you can structure it if your argument is for the reservoir overall. So here, in this paragraph 2, where we're arguing against the reservoir, you can see same thing as before. I've highlighted in green evidence from the pre-release. I've highlighted in orange where I've developed and tried to show synoptic links to the pre-release. I've also used, underlined there right in the middle, that keyword however, and this is where I really crush my own argument and say, well, even though this argument might work, I don't think it is as effective. And I've explained why. Paragraph 3 then, and the final part of your essay is your conclusion. Don't just repeat what you've already said. Try and weigh up the options. Try and use words like short-term gains versus long-term gains, local versus national, or environmental versus economy. Where are most of the arguments lying? I think in this pre-release, we do have a definite short-term versus long-term argument. And make sure you really explain your opinion. This is where you are giving your final opinion on your own thoughts. And remember, there is no right or wrong answer. Final tips then, before we finish. Remember, there are 3 SPAG marks in this. It's actually a 12-mark question, not a 9-mark. And that's for spelling, punctuation and grammar. So get that geographical terminology correct in there. Be synoptic. Remember what I've said about using those wider synoptic links. And finally, really get to know your booklet. Make sure you know it inside out. Have you highlighted everything that is to know about the argument for and against? Have you read up about it in your own time? Have you done a little Google search on the wider issues and the wider synoptic links mentioned today? Things like water deficit versus water surplus, agriculture, food security, and the climate crisis. I hope that's been helpful, and I'll see you again soon for a more edition of Revision. In the meantime, take care and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.